Look at this little hedgehog pushing a trolley. Now in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about inheritance. So right here we have Phineas and Ferb's mom and dad, right? And we know through some magic that they created Phineas, right? And just like that, each and every one of us got into this earth, okay? Each and every one of us came to existence. Now, what explains the way we look like? What explains the relationship between how we look like and our parents and our siblings and the way we behave and everything like that, like the way we run, the way we look, the way we speak, right? Why? Why does it turn out the way it does? This can be explained perfectly through inheritance, okay? And that's what we're going to be focusing on for this video. Now, it all starts a long time ago, like all good stories, okay? And it starts with a guy called Gregor Mendel. Now, I'm using Will Smith because I don't think you guys would like me to show you a picture of a black and white ancient picture of Gregor Mendel. So I'm going to show you here Will Smith, okay? He's our Gregor Mendel for this video. But just know it's not really how Gregor Mendel looks like. If you want to, you can search it up. So it starts off with this guy. Gregor Mendel is a farmer, okay? So he lives on a farm and he is not a scientist. Bear that in mind. He's simply a farmer, okay? Farmer, no science. And he's a bit curious, so he likes to do some experiments with his plants, okay? He likes to see some patterns and how they grow when he mixes different ones together and all these kinds of things, okay? He's just an intrigued farmer, okay? And so what does he do? To understand how he sparked the understanding of inheritance, okay, how he revolutionized how scientists today understand inheritance, we need to understand one keyword called pure breeding, okay? After you understand this, the rest of the video will make a lot more sense. So what is pure breeding, okay? So think about the word pure. Pure is when something is made up of only one thing, right? So for example, water is pure, okay? Water can have minerals and all these things in it, but then it's not exactly pure. So pure is when something is made up of one thing only, okay? So what is pure breeding then? It is when you make pure plants, when plants are only of one type, okay? So, for example, let's say we have this tall plant and we have this short plant. Pure breeding is when we take this tall plant and we make it reproduce with itself, so self-fertilization. You make it make babies using its own genetics, so you're making it basically, it's asexual reproduction. It's using its own genetics to make babies, okay? So, humans can't do that, right? Because you need a male and a female. But for a plant, you can do it. So you take its own genetics, and you make it self-reproduce, and you have its kids, okay? In pure breeding, if this was a purebred plant, this one, then all the kids will also be tall, okay? They will have the same height characteristics or the same characteristics as the parent plant. So that's the same thing here. When you look at this small plant, if we do pure breeding, then all the kids will be short, will have the same characteristic as the parent plant. But if we took this plant and we made it self-fertilize or self-reproduce, and most of the plants were tall, but you managed to get a short plant in there, then it means this plant was not pure, because it didn't purely create big plants. Every now and then, it manages to create a small plant. So it's not a pure plant, a purebred plant, okay? So that's what purebred plant means, okay? So what he did is he took purebred plants. So for example, he took this plant because this plant managed to create only tall plants. So it took these two plants and he would make them breed together. So let's see what happened. So he did a bunch of experiments, okay? And there's specifically, I'm going to talk about 4, okay? So the first one is going to relate to this height idea, okay? So he took 2 purebred plants, so a tall one and a short one, okay? So let's see, he took them, the tall and the short one, okay, and we can call this parent generation, okay, because they're going to be the parents, 2 purebred plants, one tall, one short, and he made them have kids together, okay? And the kid generation, or you can call it the F1 generation, he found that all of the kids, every single one, was tall, okay? So he found that interesting because it meant that the short plant didn't have like a strong trait because the shortness wasn't passed in. Only the tall managed to dominate, okay? So then what he did is he took this tall plant, okay, and he decided to make them self-reproduce, okay? He made them self-fertilize and make kids. So what he found then was when this happened, so we call this now the F2 generation, okay? So he found that when this happened, not all of the plants were tall. Every now and then, some of them were short. Specifically, he produced 1,064 F2 generation plants from this self-fertilization, and 787 of them were tall, whereas 277 were short. And if we simplify this ratio, it comes around nearly 3-to-1, okay? Nearly 3-to-1. So then he was like, this is interesting, there's a ratio, okay? And then he was like, okay, I'm gonna pick another trait, okay? So now he picked peas, okay? So he took a green pea. Again, this is a purebred pea, okay? Remember, this means when this pea reproduces, it only makes green peas. And when this pea reproduces, it only makes purple peas, okay? So he makes them now reproduce. And again, this is the parent generation. And guess what he found? He found that all of the offspring were green. So again, we're finding that there's this characteristic that is dominant. For some reason, the green is being passed on, only the green, and for some reason here, only the tall was being passed on. And then he made this one self-fertilize. And now we have the second generation. And this was interesting because the second generation had the same ratio. Notice, it evened out to 3-to-1. So that's very, very fascinating. Okay, out of 8,023 F2 generation that was made, the ratio was 3-to-1 from green to purple, or green to whatever this color is. So he was like, this cannot be a coincidence. It's almost 3-to-1 for both of them. So he does a third experiment, okay? I'm just going to review this quickly. So he took a smooth and a wrinkled pea, okay, because that's also a genetic thing. And basically, he made them reproduce. Again, they are purebred. Remember? Purebred. So it makes all smooth in the F1 generation. We make them reproduce, and for some reason in the F2 generation, there's a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay? So again, and he was like, okay, fine. One last time. I gotta confirm this one more time. So he now picks flowers. Okay, so we have these flowers, yellow and pink. Again, they're purebred. So he takes them, all of them was yellow. Yellow was the dominant trait. And then he makes this one reproduce, and again we have this 3-to-1 ratio in the F2 generation. So this could not have been a coincidence. But now remember, Gregor Mendel, or Will Smith, is just a farmer. He doesn't understand anything yet. And back in this time, when he was alive, the scientists have not even discovered genetics yet. So he sparked everything. He pretty much found a pattern that was very interesting, okay? And we know nowadays it's explained because of genetics. But scientists didn't know this yet. And because of his patterns, they were compelled, and they were like, we gotta find out the reason. Why is this pattern being followed? It must be something in this plant that makes the green more dominant, or the height more dominant. There must be something that we need to find. And so that's exactly what scientists went and did. But Gregor Mendel would never find out because he only found this pattern. He died before the scientists could figure out the real reason, okay? So he concluded, he was like confused, and he was like, wow, that's interesting, there's a pattern, but why the heck? Why the heck is this happening? So he pretty much just came up with something simple, and he said, there must be something, some factors, some reasons, some things that these tall plants have that make them more dominant, that makes their offspring be tall, even when they're combined with short. There must be something, a factor, a strong and a weak factor. You know what I mean? That's what he thought to himself, and he was on the right track. Because later, scientists found out the exact reason, and I'm going to explain that. And this factors he was talking about, the scientist called alleles. And when he was saying strong factors, the scientist called it dominant. And when he was saying weak factors, the scientist called it recessive. This will not make sense right now, but I'm going to make it make sense very soon in this video, okay? So this is where the story ends for Gregor Mendel. He was just our farmer that did all these experiments and found a pattern, okay? A pattern of inheritance, okay? For some reason, okay? So now we move on to the modern day and the actual things that scientists found to be true. So we start off with a blank page. Or is this page really blank? So let's get to it. So we take now, okay, we're going to take now this tall plant, okay? And scientists got smart over the years and they managed to have many tools and stuff. So now they're managed to zoom in and find that this plant is made up of cells, right? We know this already. And these cells are made up of a lot of organelles, right? One of which is a nucleus. We know now, but Gregor Mendel didn't know, that living organisms have DNA, okay? And we know the DNA is stored in the nucleus in the form of chromosomes, right? Chromosomes. Different species have different amounts of chromosomes. Humans, for example, have 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. So this is one pair of chromosomes, right? We call it a pair because one is from your mom, one is from your dad, okay? So what am I trying to get at? What am I trying to get at? Just tell me already. Okay, so we know this is a chromosome, okay? And we have a whole bunch of them in our DNA. And now we're talking about a plant though, okay? So a plant has a certain amount of chromosomes. We're taking one pair, okay? One pair of chromosomes. You just need to know, by the way, that chromosomes, right, carry genetics, right? They carry specific, your DNA is essentially, simply put, it is an instruction manual, okay? And it's got the code to tell your body how you need to look like, okay? So your genetics, okay? Now, each chromosome carries different instructions or different information. So we're taking this one, okay? Because this one has the code for height, okay? And it lies right here, okay? Oh, this one could be, for example, color, okay? This one could be something else and something else and something else, okay? So what do we call these lines, these bands, okay? These bands of information. By the way, genes, okay, we're talking about genes, not these kinds of genes, although I wish we were. Now, these little areas here, these little bands are called locus or locuses, okay? And they represent different traits, okay? Different traits. This one up here, we're gonna call height, okay? Now, remember I said one of them is from your mom and one of them is from your dad. Because we know, depending on what your mom and your dad's DNA is, you will have a specific outcome, okay? So let's say height. So we can see here, the mom and the dad had the same trait, the same allele for height. So allele is a version of a gene, So if we have here the genes for height, this is your mom's and this is your dad's, you can see they're both the same, okay? Your alleles can only be two things, dominant or recessive, okay? Remember here, dominant or recessive. Dominant meaning, you'll see what I mean. So in this case, dominant will be tall and recessive will be short, okay? So we can see here on this, for this plant, this tall plant, both of its alleles, one which came from the mom, one which came from the dad, is green. And we're making green here dominant, okay? Dominant. So that's why he is tall, because he has both the dominant alleles, the dominant form of a gene. Okay, so yeah, we focused on this one only, okay? Now, so that's why he's tall. What if one of the alleles, so say from the dad or from the mom, was recessive? Would this plant still be tall? Let's take a look. So here we have the same plant, okay, tall plant, and we look, but the dad's allele for height is recessive, okay, whereas the mom's is dominant, yet the plant is still tall. So this shows the importance of dominant. If there's any dominant allele in the presence of a recessive allele, the plant will only show the dominant one. That's why it's called the dominant allele, okay? So dominant allele masks or outweighs the recessive allele, okay? So if you have a tall plant, it could either have both of its alleles for height be dominant, which will make them tall, or it could have one dominant and one recessive, which would still make the plant tall, because as long as there's one dominant, the plant will be tall, okay? Okay, now, what about short? So let's look at the short plant. So when we look at the short plant's chromosome for height, or locus for height, we can see both of them are red. So both of them are recessive, okay? And when both of them are recessive, now the plant will be short, because there's physically no dominant one. So there's no choice. It has to be short, okay? It has to be short. Okay, cool. So that's the very basis of what the scientists found for all these traits. Now, how does that make sense for his pattern, right? Because we saw he had this pattern, okay? Why did this pattern arise? I'm going to show exactly why this pattern arose, okay? So, real quick, you need to understand something about reproduction, just to make sure, okay? So we know here is your mom's DNA, here's your dad's DNA, and when they reproduce, they will form your DNA, okay? But there's many combinations. So we're taking one chromosome here, okay? This happens with all your chromosomes. All the chromosomes. We're just taking one example here. We know that each parent only passes on one chromosome. So this is a chromosome pair, right? So this is the mom's moms and the mom's dads, but they only pass on one of them. So which one? So it's random, that's the point. So the offspring could look like many things. Otherwise, you would look the same as your siblings. So I'm giving one variation here. So for example, if the dad passed on this one and the mom passed on this one, then it would look like this. Then this would be your chromosome, okay? But there's many possibilities. The dad could have passed on this one and the mom could have passed on this one and it would have looked different. Or the mom could have passed on this one and the dad could have passed on this one and it would have looked different. Okay, so there's many combinations that can happen, okay? That makes your DNA your DNA. So let's now go to something called the Punnett Grid. This is gonna explain perfectly the pattern that Gregor Mendel or Will Smith found, okay? So now I need to quickly clarify something. Notice I'm putting H's, capital H, okay? So remember how for us, we said that the dominant one is green and the recessive one is red. Now I'm doing this, I made this color for clarification, but on your test, when something is dominant, you give it a capital letter, whereas if something is recessive, you give it a lowercase letter. So for example, let's take the letter H, okay? So if it's dominant, we give it a capital H for height. And if it's recessive, we give it a lowercase h, okay? So instead of color, but I will still use color, but you know what I mean. So here we have parent 1, okay, parent 2, so basically mom or dad, and their gametes, their DNA is being passed on, okay? So let's say this is the one parent, so the mom, and she has 2 alleles, right? Green and green. We know this is dominant and dominant, but I'm gonna put here letters to make sure that you understand when your teachers talk to you. So capital H represents dominant, capital H represents dominant. Now if both your parents have 2 dominant alleles, because remember, each parent has 2 alleles, okay? 2 alleles, and they're gonna pass one on. Each parent will pass only one on, okay? Not both, otherwise you'll have way too many chromosomes. You won't be human anymore. Okay, so let's say, so here, the purpose of a Punnett grid is to show what the kid can get, what different combinations the kid can become depending on the parents. Okay, so for example, if both the parents have dominant alleles only, then let's say we combine. Let's say the kid gets this one from this parent and this one from the other parent. Then what's the genotype going to be? So what is genotype? Genotype refers to what letters the kids are going to get. What is their DNA going to look like? So we know the kid will have H and H. So we'll call it capital H, okay? What phenotype will that be? We know phenotype means what physical manifestation will you have? Meaning, what will it look like when I look at it? Okay, when I see it. Tall, okay? These two give the phenotype of tall, okay? Tall. So phenotype means what you look like from the external world, okay? Or what you look like externally. Now, what if this parent gave this one and the other parent gave the same one? What is the other possibility? Then it could be H and H and tall. So we can see if both parents have dominant alleles, no matter what combination we take, now it could be this one and this one, the kid will still have both dominant alleles and he will always be tall, okay? Do you understand this? So it's 100% chance, 100% chance that the baby will be tall. So we can understand, going back to this one here, when I was talking about peer breeding, that means that these plants, the parent plants, must have both alleles dominant because all their kids are dominant. All their kids are tall. So that was the example I was just mentioning. So peer breeding means that these parent plants have both the same alleles, So either both dominant or both recessive. So let me show you the recessive one. Because if they're both dominant, all the babies will be tall or dominant, okay? No matter what, there's no way, no combination that can make short. So the same way here, this is another peer breeding example. If both the parents had the recessive allele or the small h, then no matter what combination we give, the genotype will always be HH and the phenotypes will always be short. They will always be short. There's no way you can make a tall child, okay? So that's what I meant by the peer breeding aspect. Now remember, quickly, Gregor Mendel, sorry that I have to scroll up like this. Now Gregor Mendel took these purebred tall and short plants and combined them and made them have kids. And remember, they were all tall. They were all tall. So let's see why this happens. So he's going to take one of these purebred plants, which means it's either capital H, or small h. So he takes one. So he takes one that's tall dominant, so purebred tall and purebred short. Okay, and he's going to combine them. And we know all the offspring will be short. So let's see how that, all the offspring will be tall. So let's see how that happens. So when you combine big H, small h, what do we get? Big H and small h. That's what the offspring will have. And we can see that's going to happen here as well. Big H, small h. Big H, small h. That's going to be big H, small h. And same here, okay? So all the kids will have the same genotype, H and H. Now what does big H and small h correspond to? We know when there's a dominant one, when there's a dominant allele, even with a recessive allele, the phenotype will always be what the dominant allele makes. Okay, and a dominant allele here makes tall. So all the kids will be tall. Okay, so isn't that interesting? When he took the two purebred plants, the tall and the short, they all made tall kids because of this dominant allele. Okay, by the way, you need to quickly, and we call this process of combining purebred tall plants and purebred short plants monohybrid cross. And this can apply to any kind of trait, not just height, okay? I'm just using height, but a monohybrid cross is when you combine two purebred traits, okay? Now, quickly, you need to, while we're at it, I want to explain what homozygous means. So homozygous means, homo means the same, and zygous means basically same allele, sort of, because zygote means, this is zygote. When a parent and when a mom and a dad's DNA gets mixed, so one of these chromosomes will mix with one of those chromosomes, and you have the offspring. This is a zygote. Okay, this is a zygote. Okay, when the offspring cell is made through the combination of the parent's DNA. Okay, now homozygous, so same zygote. This means homozygous means when they have the same alleles. So this parent is HH, so it's homozygous dominant because he has the same alleles for dominant. And this one is homozygous recessive because we have the same alleles but for recessive, so it's homozygous. Parent 1 was homozygous, parent 2 was homozygous. But parent 1 was homozygous dominant, whereas parent 2 was homozygous recessive, okay? That's a quick vocab word. And no worries, I have all these terms defined at the end of this video on a page, okay? I wrote them all out because I don't want to make the page too full. Okay, so now the next thing he did, remember, let me show you. The next thing he did was he took these plants that were all tall that we just formed and made them reproduce with themselves. Okay, so let's look at that. Okay, so he took all of these, so he took these and made them reproduce with themselves. So you see, dominant, recessive, and he makes them reproduce with each other. So, by the way, we call this heterozygous. Hetero means different, because now they're not both the same, they're different, so it's heterozygous. Okay, so what's going to happen? We have one possibility, that will be H and H, okay, and we know H and H means tall, and we have another possibility that is big H, small h. The order doesn't matter. You can put small h first and then big H, it doesn't matter, but through convention, normally scientists like to put the capital letter first. So we know since there's a dominant H in the presence of a recessive H, it will still be tall. And here, again, big H, small h, so tall. Last one, small h, okay, so that's different. This is recessive, and we know when there's no dominant and two recessives, the plant will be short. So you can see, out of 4, 3 will be tall, 1 will be short. So the ratio is 3 to 1. 3 to 1. So we just proved why this happens. Why there's 3 to 1 ratio. Okay? So that's crazy. So scientists managed to figure out the reason why his experiments showed a 3 to 1 ratio when this process happened. It's all because of these factors or alleles, these 2 alleles that can be dominant or recessive, and depending on what the parents have, the child will have a different outcome, right? So that's why this happens. It's very, very interesting. Okay, now there's quickly something I just want to give you a small tip. So never ever, so you're gonna have to use capital letters and small letters. Whenever you have a trait, so for example, you'll get a new trait, it's not height, it's something else, never ever label it with O, S, X, C, or V, because these, the capital letters, look the same as the lowercase letters. So you'll confuse yourself because you'll look at it and be like, wait, was that a capital letter or a lowercase letter, right? You might get confused. And again, the order doesn't matter. So if it's big B, or small b, big B, it doesn't matter. Scientists just like to put the capital letter first and then the lowercase letter. Okay, oh yeah, like I promised, here are some important definitions that you need to know. I didn't write them out in the video, but here I write them so it's clear and easy to see. So I hope you learned something and can take something away from this video.